going out over the weekend, and I've headed it, Jimmy Savile, doorman to the cesspit. You could say doorway to the cesspit as well, for reasons I'll explain. I was first told that Jimmy Savile was a pedophile in about 1997-98 by a number of people, but including the people who had serious connections into the royal family. Not that they were members of the royal family, but they had very close to people that were on the inside. And they told me about the Satanism that went on in the royal family, the pedophilia, and all that stuff. And then out of nowhere, they brought up Jimmy Savile. And of course, I'm into a conversation about, royal family, how they treated Diana, pedophilia and all this stuff, and suddenly Jimmy Savile comes out of nowhere, this aging disc jockey.
For people to appreciate what the BBC is and does. I mean, what was interesting about the whole period is that the BBC's the trust of the public in the BBC never wavered. The trust in Blair went like that. If you end up in a battle with the BBC and you're a politician, by and large the BBC wins.
Reputation for trust and integrity is one of his most precious assets, and yet do you not accept that that is in jeopardy? His most precious assets, and yet do you not accept that that is in jeopardy as a result of some of the suggestions that have been made in the last few weeks?
There is no question that what Jimmy Savile did and the way the BBC behaved in the years that the culture and practices of the BBC seemed to allow Jimmy Savile to do what he did will raise questions of trust for us. It is a matter of regret and embarrassment that the version of events that were recorded in Peter Rippon's blog on the 2nd of October did not turn out to be as accurate as they should have been. I think the fact of last night's panorama is something everybody in the BBC should be incredibly proud of.
Then I'll get on my knees and I pray. We don't get fooled again.
Huge BBC crisis, of course, at the time of the Hutton affair. How do you rate this, and what's your advice to the people at the top now?
Well, I first of all, I'd say I have some sympathy with George, who turns up in a job and this happens 3 weeks later. I mean, he hasn't had that background, he hasn't had that experience. My advice is keep your nerve, try to be consistent, discuss with your colleagues, keep them on side. And try to go through it. I mean, it's like all stories. In the end, this story will fade away for a while, because all stories do.
Is that he was a procurer of children, and he procured them for the royal family. He procured them for people like Ted Heath, who is exposed as a Satanist, paedophile, and mass child killer, serial child killer, in a book called The Biggest Secret. It came out in 1998. He was alive then for years afterwards. And he was therefore untouchable. If you look at some of the quotes that he gave at various times, he said he was untouchable. And he gave an interview for Esquire magazine, in which he said, the thing about me is I get things done and I work deep cover. I've known the royal family for a million years. He was talking about his connections to the royal family and how he was a regular visitor to Buckingham Palace, Kensington Palace, where Diana lived after the marriage to Charles broke up, Highgrove, the country estate of Prince Charles. And he also said, significantly, that the man who introduced him to the royal family initially in the 1960s was Lord Mountbatten. And anyone who's done research into high-level paedophilia, Lord Mountbatten's name will come up. Of course, he was the mentor and Mr. Uncle, big uncle to Prince Charles. And these names are not a surprise to me, because these names came up in the conversations I had with these insiders quite a long time ago now. And because he was procuring for children, this is why he was untouchable. You know, people say, well, why didn't people know about this? Why didn't the BBC uncover it? Why did all these, inquiries, police inquiries, just stop and go nowhere? Because the way these rings work is that they put their people in all the key areas of society, the institutions of law enforcement, of judiciary, of media, of politics. Of course, royalties are much based on it. And therefore, they watch each other's backs. And when you're procuring children for the rich and famous and the powerful and all the rest of it, then your back is their back. Because if you go under and it comes out, they go under and it comes out. And one of two things happens to these procurers of children. Either they keep quiet and are safe, like Savile, hence he got to the age of 84, or you're considered dangerous and not safe, in which case you're no longer with us. And Savile understood the game, and he played the game to his own benefit. And another question, maybe someone can answer it. Maybe there's a plausible answer. But I look at his Rolls Royce that went for about 160 grand. I look at his other cars, Bentleys and stuff. I look at, apparently, according to the media anyway, he has at least 8 homes. I look at the millions of pounds in cash on top of all that, in bank accounts that was in his will. And I look at a guy who, yes, would have earned quite well in the 60s and 70s as the disc jockey and Jim Will Fix It and personal appearances and advertising. But then I look at a guy of 84 who's done none of that for decades and has no real obvious means of living that lifestyle, but still does. And, all I can say is procuring children for rich and famous pedophiles is a very lucrative business.
Okay, thank you, Field. And there are two really exciting issues that we could address in the next hour. One is the relationship between Edwina Currie, who was the mistress of a former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom by the name of John Major, who went on to work in Carlisle. And Edwina Currie apparently used to describe the former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom as her toy boy. Well, probably that's suitable a few years ago, but it also turns out that Edwina Currie was the woman who handed over the gold-plated key to a serial pedophile, the late Jimmy Savile, which gave him access to the inmates of the Broadmoor Prison Hospital, where apparently he would come in with his own elements of his anatomy, which I don't want to explore in any great detail, but bringing in guests who were able